You know, usually when we think about a crime scene, there is this totally ingrained expectation of physical boundaries. Like, picture a movie set.
Oh, yeah, the classic setup.
Right. You have the yellow police tape stretched between two trees, the flashing lights bouncing off the pavement, an investigator meticulously dusting a front doorknob for fingerprints. It's a highly specific place, completely frozen in a specific moment of time.
Exactly. It's entirely geographically contained. I mean, the moment you step over that yellow tape, you are inside the scene. And the moment you step back out, you're back in the normal, everyday world.
But the second you step into the modern reality of digital forensics, that physical boundary just, well, it completely evaporates. Suddenly, that yellow police tape has to stretch around the entire globe.
It really does.
We are looking at an investigative landscape that is completely unbounded, primarily because the single most critical piece of evidence isn't left behind in a living room anymore. It walks out the door right in the suspect's pocket.
Yeah, the smartphone changes everything.
It does. So, welcome to today's deep dive. If you are tuning in as the learner, someone who wants to cut through the noise and grab the absolute most important insights from the forefront of technology, you are in the exact right place. We have a massive mission today.
We really do. We are going to explore the absolute bleeding edge of digital forensics.
Yeah, and we are working directly from a highly detailed internal source document detailing the Greyhawk Digital Suite. That's a phone forensics analysis system.
And we're going to unpack how investigators extract, analyze, and fundamentally mathematically verify the digital truth from the modern world's ultimate witness.
The smartphone.
Right, because the smartphone has undeniably rewired the basic nature of evidence gathering. Law enforcement, they aren't just looking for a static smoking gun left in a physical location anymore.
No, they're not.
They're tapping into these continuous, invisible historical data streams.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because what we are talking about today isn't just a simple matter of a detective plugging a USB cable into a phone and, reading a couple of deleted text messages.
It's so much bigger than that.
It is a staggering, almost incomprehensible scale of data that we all carry around every single day. We're going to look at how modern software can tear down and process up to 8 suspects' phones at the exact same time.
Which is huge.
Right? And we'll get into the surprisingly strict linguistic rules, like literally the grammar and phrasing that investigators must follow just to keep this evidence from being thrown out of court.
The linguistic aspect is often the biggest blind spot for people looking at forensic science, actually.
Right.
Oh, yeah. You can have all the irrefutable data in the world, but if an investigator fails to articulate exactly what that data represents with total scientific neutrality, a judge will just toss it out.
It is wild how fragile the whole system can be. But before we break down the actual extraction technology, I'm stuck on the sheer volume of the problem investigators are facing today.
The scale is definitely the main issue.
Our sources paint a very vivid picture of the 2025 reality, and they use a phrase that honestly gave me a bit of a chill. They describe modern phones as persistent sensors. Persistent sensors, yes.
They aren't just communication devices anymore. They are constantly, silently recording location data, biometrics, and complex social networks, like without us actively doing a single thing.
That term, persistent sensor, it captures the mechanism perfectly because a sensor, by definition, does not require your active participation or
Right.
your permission to collect data.
Mm.
I mean, you do not have to hit send on a text message for your phone to log that you've walked into a coffee shop, automatically connected to their public Wi-Fi, and then checked your bank balance using a biometric Face ID scan.
It just does it.
Exactly. The device logs that entire sequence of events completely on its own.
And the sheer number of these sensors flooding the world is just mind-boggling. Like, I have the IDC Worldwide Quarterly Mobile Phone Tracker Forecast open right here.
The February report.
Yeah, this was just published on February 24th, 2025, and the numbers are wild. They project 1.26 billion smartphone units shipping globally in 2025 alone. That is a 2.3% year-over-year global growth. And you have to keep in mind, that is just new shipments in a single year.
Right, right.
That 1.26 billion is being added to the billions of active devices that are already in circulation.
And the regional breakdown here is what really catches my eye. Like, China is growing at 5.6%, the US at 3.3%. But the massive, aggressive spikes are happening in emerging markets.
The iOS growth in those regions is incredible.
Yeah. It shows Indonesia iOS growth hitting 9% and India iOS growth at a staggering 18%. So this isn't some localized Western phenomenon. It is an exploding global web of data collection.
Absolutely global.
So I want you to think about this differently. Forget the traditional idea of forensics with the fingerprint dust and the magnifying glass. Those 1.26 billion devices shipping this year, there are effectively 1.26 billion continuous surveillance drones being voluntarily carried around by the public.
It's true.
We are buying them, charging them, and carrying them with us to the bathroom, to our cars, to our beds.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, for the investigators on the ground, the core challenge of their jobs has completely inverted.
How do you mean?
Well, 10 or 15 years ago, the challenge was access. It was all about how do we crack this phone and get the data.
Right, breaking the password.
Exactly. The encryption was the main barrier. But today, while device encryption is obviously still a massive technical hurdle, the primary bottleneck is entirely different. The problem is now one of scale.
So it's not if they can get in, it's what happens after.
Yes. The question is now, how do we process this absolutely overwhelming global volume of data at the speed of an actual ongoing investigation?
Because if a detective seizes a phone during a raid, and it takes their department like 3 months to manually scroll through every photo, every location ping, and every app cache.
The case has gone entirely cold.
Right. The suspects have fled, the money has been moved, the trail is just dead.
The volume of data has become a literal wall for human beings. You simply cannot manually process a modern 512 gigabyte device in any reasonable investigative time frame.
It would be impossible.
An investigator would spend years on a single phone. That is exactly why the industry desperately needed what the source document refers to as a generational leap in capability.
Which brings us to the Greyhawk Digital Suite. The value proposition they outline is heavily focused on automation. Greyhawk claims their system reduces an investigator's manual workload by up to 70%.
70% is a huge metric.
It is a massive return of time. The goal is to let the human investigator focus on actual intelligence and high-level pattern recognition rather than the administrative nightmare of manually logging thousands of individual files.
And a massive portion of that 70% reduction in manual effort is achieved through their parallel operations capability.
Right, the parallel processing.
The Greyhawk architecture is built to allow the simultaneous processing of up to 8 devices.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I was trying to visualize what it actually looks like to process 8 multi-gigabyte phones at once. The human brain just cannot do that.
No, it definitely can't.
I want you to imagine trying to read 8 different encyclopedias simultaneously while looking for a single misspelled word. It is pure cognitive overload.
That's a great analogy.
And the software is pulling from everywhere at once, right? Deleted WhatsApp messages, WeChat logs, encrypted Telegram chats, remote iCloud backups, Skype calls. So how does the software actually synthesize this incredibly chaotic, fragmented data into something a human detective can read and make sense of without losing their mind?
The solution outlined in the document is the Unified Searchable Investigative Workbench.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
So Greyhawk doesn't just dump all the raw files from 8 different phones into one giant, messy desktop folder. It fundamentally restructures the data. It imports disparate data types, whether that data is coming from a direct wired insertion into a seized phone, a remote pull from a cloud backup, or a mirrored file system. And it translates everything into one common visual language.
Oh, wow. So a Telegram message, a standard SMS text, and a WhatsApp voice note are all formatted so they can be viewed side by side on the exact same timeline.
Yes, exactly. They are normalized. But the true power of the workbench is in the data filtering.
Right, because there's still too much data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To go back to your encyclopedia analogy, the investigator isn't actually reading the encyclopedias. They are telling the software exactly what specific page to look at across all 8 books simultaneously.
Oh, that makes sense.
The system uses metadata tags, things like specific timeframes, device IDs, or read and unread status tags, to instantly eliminate all the digital noise. So if the warrant only covers events between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. last Tuesday, Greyhawk filters out the millions of other data points outside that specific window.
So we use this software to crack the bottleneck, process 8 phones at once, and filter out the irrelevant noise. What exactly is left? What is pouring out of these devices that is so valuable to an investigation?
The industry term used in the source material is pattern of life data, or POL.
Pattern of life. That sounds intense.
It is. This goes so much deeper than just pulling a list of contacts or reading an email. Pattern of life data provides deep, unavoidable context into human intent and action.
It establishes routines.
Exactly. When do you wake up? Who do you communicate with first? What specific route do you drive to work every Thursday? This is the true digital footprint.
Our sources give a very specific breakdown of the forensic artifact volumes typically detected in a phone extraction. And the discrepancy in these numbers completely blew my mind.
The ratios are always surprising to people.
When you look at the raw volume, location data is the highest by a massive margin, coming in at 56,200 hits.
Yeah.
And when we say location data, we're talking GPS coordinates, Wi-Fi connection logs, and cell tower triangulation. Compare that to messages and encrypted chat, which is the second highest, but only comes in at 34,500 hits.
It is a profound shift in how we view evidence. Location data hits outnumber active messages by more than 20,000 individual data points in their typical extraction sample.
That is insane. And following that, you have app databases at 21,400 hits.
Right.
Media files, which includes photos, videos, and all that hidden EXIF metadata, like the exact latitude and longitude where a photo was taken, sits at 12,800. And finally, system logs at 8,900.
It really paints a picture.
It does. But I really want to pause on that massive gap between location data and messages, because I think we all naturally assume our text messages are our biggest digital footprint.
It's what we actively create, so it's what we remember.
Right. But I want you to consider for a second what tells a more accurate, objective story of your day. The carefully curated text message you sent to your partner saying you were sticking to your diet and eating a salad.
Or the silent, invisible Wi-Fi handshakes your phone made with the router at the donut shop for 45 minutes while the phone was just sitting in your pocket.
Exactly. The donut shop handshake wins every single time.
It does. The texts represent the narrative you wanted to construct. The Wi-Fi handshakes represent the physical reality of what you actually did.
Wow.
And this highlights a key difference. Unlike traditional computer forensics, which usually deals with a relatively static hard drive sitting untouched on an office desk, mobile forensics deals with highly volatile storage.
Because we carry them everywhere.
Exactly. The devices are constantly moving, constantly pinging new cellular networks, and undergoing rapid background updates.
So the device is essentially testifying about your physical reality without your permission.
That is the perfect way to phrase it. The goal of modern digital forensics isn't just finding a single deleted photo of a crime scene. It is reconstructing a continuous, minute-by-minute mosaic of behavior.
That is terrifyingly precise.
They want to show the jury that your phone pinged a cell tower near the scene, that your biometric heart rate monitor in your smartwatch spiked at the exact time of the incident, and that your system logs show the phone screen was unlocked seconds later to open a navigation app.
Which is incredible evidence. But here is the massive catch. Having a mountain of pattern-of-life data showing someone at a donut shop or a crime scene is entirely useless if a sharp defense attorney in a courtroom can prove that the data was tampered with.
Or altered by a sloppy detective.
Right. Or just misinterpreted by the software. At the end of the day, it's just invisible ones and zeros. How do you prove to a jury it's actually real?
You have to follow the process perfectly.
Which brings us to the incredibly strict scientific methodology required to make this evidence hold up in court: the science of truth.
The foundational methodology for establishing that truth is broken down into 4 strict, non-negotiable steps: acquire, preserve, analyze, and report.
Okay.
If law enforcement breaks the chain on any one of those steps, the evidence is legally compromised and likely inadmissible.
Let's look at step 2, the pre-check, because the physical mechanics of this are just fascinating. The very first thing an investigator has to do before pulling a single byte of data is physically isolate the phone.
Yes.
They put it in airplane mode or lock it inside a Faraday shield. Now, a Faraday shield is basically a specialized physical enclosure. It's often a bag or a metal box that is woven with conductive materials to block all incoming and outgoing electromagnetic signals.
Exactly.
Why is that specific physical barrier so crucial the second a phone is seized?
Well, imagine law enforcement raids a cartel compound and seizes a high-level lieutenant's smartphone.
Okay.
The moment that device is taken, the police have to ensure that its contents cannot be altered remotely. If a co-conspirator realizes the lieutenant was arrested and the phone was taken, they can simply log into a laptop across the world and send a remote wipe command.
Oh, wow. Instantly destroying all the evidence.
Exactly. A Faraday shield physically blocks that cellular or Wi-Fi signal from ever reaching the device. It ensures the digital crime scene is completely frozen from outside interference.
That makes total sense. Then we move to step 3. Acquisition and integrity. And this is where the math comes in to save the day.
The math is the only thing the courts will trust.
Right. The source notes that the Greyhawk system automatically calculates something called MD5 checksums, but it also explicitly recommends that investigators manually document SHA 256 hashes as a best practice for future-proofing that integrity.
Yes, hashing is fundamental.
Now, hold up. I need to admit some confusion here. How does a math equation turn a 512 gigabyte hard drive into a verifiable barcode? Like, how does it know if I changed a single pixel in a photograph?
It relies on what we call the avalanche effect in cryptography.
The avalanche effect.
Yeah, think of a hash algorithm like MD5 or the more complex SHA 256 as a digital fingerprinting machine. You run a file, or the entire image of a phone's hard drive, through this complex mathematical algorithm.
Okay.
The algorithm processes all the ones and zeros and spits out a unique fixed-length string of letters and numbers.
So it's a digital signature of that exact data set in that exact moment.
Yes. And because of the avalanche effect, if an investigator accidentally or maliciously alters even one single pixel in a photograph, or changes one single letter in a deleted text message, the entire resulting hash value completely changes.
Wait, really? The whole thing changed?
The whole thing. It won't look even remotely similar to the original. So when an investigator first acquires the data in the lab, they hash it immediately. Months or years later in a courtroom, they hash the evidence file again in front of the judge.
I see.
If those two massive barcodes match perfectly, they have mathematically proven that not a single byte of data has been altered since the moment the phone was dropped into that Faraday shield.
So math provides the undeniable lock and key, and this fits perfectly into the 4 governance pillars outlined in the document, which explain how the system protects the integrity of the investigation. You have data privacy. This isn't just a suggestion. The software physically filters out personally identifiable information that falls outside the legal scope of the warrant, preventing an investigator from just, browsing a suspect's private, unrelated photos.
And then you have audit trails. The software acts as a supervisor, secretly logging every single keystroke and search query an investigator makes.
That's incredibly important.
It is, because a defense attorney can request that audit trail to see exactly how the detective arrived at their conclusions.
And rounding it out, you have secure storage utilizing encrypted Greyhawk evidence lockers and the chain of custody, which relies on those digital signatures and hashing timestamps we just unpacked.
All of those pillars exist to prove the raw authenticity of the data. But here is the vulnerability. Even if the data is flawlessly authentic, the investigator can still completely ruin the case in the final step.
The reporting.
Exactly, the reporting.
So what does this all mean? This is my absolute favorite part of the entire document. It's called the Doctrine of Claim Discipline.
It's brilliant.
It really is. It is the critical, fundamental difference between what the computer sees, which is an observation, and what the investigator believes, which is an inference or a conclusion. It's basically forced humility for detectives.
Forced humility is a great way to put it.
I like to think of it like reading a medical thermometer. If you take my temperature, the thermometer can only tell you that the number on the screen is 101 degrees. That is the observation.
Right.
The thermometer cannot tell you that I have the flu. That is an inference.
What's fascinating here is how deeply this rigid discipline of language protects our civil liberties. I mean, a computer system cannot testify to human intent.
No, it can't.
The document provides brilliant examples of this phrasing. An unprofessional, speculative phrasing would be an investigator writing in their report, the suspect sent a message at 1400.
Which sounds completely normal to a layperson. If I see a text from your phone, I naturally assume you sent it.
We do that in daily life all the time. But legally, it's a massive, dangerous assumption. How does the software know the suspect sent it?
It doesn't.
Exactly. The software only knows the device was used. So the required professional forensic phrasing dictated by claim discipline is, the device contains a message record sent at 1400.
It strips the human out of it entirely.
It has to.
Another example they give, an amateur detective would write, the suspect was definitely at the scene, but a trained Greyhawk analyst following claim discipline must write, location logs are consistent with the device being in the vicinity.
It is a vital scientific distinction. Because your device logging a location, ping, the raw observation, does not definitively prove that you were holding the phone at the scene, which is the inference.
Right, because your phone could have been stolen.
Perhaps it was stolen an hour earlier. Perhaps you left it in a friend's car. Claim discipline prevents law enforcement from presenting their personal theories as undeniable digital facts.
That makes total sense.
The final conclusion about who is actually holding the phone is left to the jury based on the totality of all the evidence.
It really forces everyone in the justice system to respect the boundary between raw data and human behavior.
Yeah.
So let's bring this all together.
Let's do it.
We started by looking at a world that will see 1.26 billion new smartphones acting as persistent sensors this year alone.
A staggering number.
We saw how technology like the Greyhawk Workbench is desperately needed to automate 70% of the manual labor, processing 8 devices at once just to break through the overwhelming bottleneck of data.
And we examine the reality of the digital footprint, discovering that our silent Wi-Fi handshakes and location pings vastly outnumber the messages we actively send, which creates an incredibly detailed, continuous pattern of life.
And finally, we explored the intense scientific and linguistic rigor, the Faraday shields blocking remote wipes, the MD5 and SHA-256 hashing proving mathematical integrity, and the doctrine of claim discipline required to turn those billions of volatile data points into objective truth in a courtroom.
The founder of Greyhawk, Rafael Timbus, has a quote in the source material that perfectly anchors everything we've explored today.
Oh, what does he say?
He states, "Technology's greatest purpose is to provide hope and uncover truth. With the Greyhawk digital suite, we provide the tools to do both with absolute integrity."
Integrity is really the key word there. It's not just about having the sheer computational power to see the data. It's about having the structural discipline to interpret it correctly.
Absolutely.
Which leaves me with one final thought I want you to mull over today as you go about your week. The manual emphasizes over and over that mobile devices are the ultimate witnesses because they contain our raw, unfiltered pattern of life data.
Right.
But we also know that human memory is incredibly flawed. We misremember times, we confuse faces, and we alter locations in our minds constantly. So I want you to think about this. If our digital footprints, our exact GPS locations, our biometric heart rates, our unedited system logs are recorded with such absolute mathematical precision, what happens in a courtroom when a human memory fundamentally contradicts the digital truth?
That's the big question.
If a witness swears under oath that they clearly remember one thing happening, but the MD5 verified hash of a smartphone physically proves another, have we finally reached a point in society where we trust the device in our pocket more than we trust our own minds? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.